how can you get to a place where you feel optimistic, you feel good, even though there's lots of craziness going on and you don't have an awful lot of the answers, you're still in a good place to be able to face into them.
You're listening to the Building a Coaching Culture podcast. If you need to compete and win in the 21st century labor market as an employer of choice, this podcast is for you. Each week, we share leadership development, coaching, and culture development insights from leading experts who are developing world-class cultures in their own organizations. And now, here's your host, J.R. Flatter.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. I'm J.R. Flatter, and as usual, I'm here with my co-host, Lucas.
Hello.
I'm in Las Vegas this week at the Society for Human Resource Management Conference. So you can imagine all the excitement with all these HR folks running around. Actually, 20,000+ come to the city. Yeah, it's an amazing show. We're here with our distinguished guest, Russel Harvey.
Hello.
There's an 8-hour time difference between you and me, Russell. So it's just after 8 in the morning here. And normally when I'm on the West Coast or East Coast, it's +5. So I'm just assuming it's +8. So 1 o'clock in the afternoon for you.
Yeah, it's 4 o'clock here.
Oh, okay. So given the time change, okay.
Yeah, but time zones they are really confusing. Even sometimes just the 1 hour one with Europe, it can be so much back and forth of like, I thought we were meeting at 12. Now we said 1. And, it goes around in circles forever, essentially.
And then we have daylight savings to add or subtract one,
So this is a global cohort. So I'll just remind everybody, all of our listeners and viewers, leaders of complex organizations from across the globe, different cultures, different ethnicities. So we're across Sydney, and Ireland, and now you and others in the UK. And so we're struggling with those time zones all the time. We teach at 5 o'clock in the evening on the East Coast because it's, depending on the time of year, anywhere between 7 and 9 a.m. in Sydney. So they're getting up and we're finishing our day. So, Russell, leaders of complex organizations that are trying to compete and succeed in the 21st century in this global labor market, with all of the things going on, we're well into the 21st century now, almost a quarter of the way through this first century. And you have a topic in your life that's near and dear to Lucas and I, and that's all about resilience. As my thinking continues to mature and I'm looking at this relationship between resilience and perhaps grit and vulnerability, because we're asked in the 21st century, be vulnerable, but also we need to be resilient. So I want to pass over to you and let you, first of all, brag about yourself. I know that's probably challenging for most of us, but tell us about this great work that you're doing that I'm seeing here on your website and on your LinkedIn profile.
Thank you. Well, I'll try. Yeah, so I am brilliant. I'm amazing. No, yeah, that doesn't work. I'm British. It's like my insides have just turned to jelly. It's like, it is fantastic when you do different work in the States than the UK. When, yes, you ask people to just, when they walk into the room in the States, people come up and shake your hand and go, hello, my name's so-and-so, let me tell you about yourself. And in the UK, they literally just walk in the room and give you a nod. It's brilliant. It's amazing. So I am the resilience coach, fancy marketing, not any old resilience coach, the resilience coach. And I am a coach and a facilitator. That's who I am. That's what I do. A good mate of mine, the one I was just talking about off air that I went to Vegas with recently, he did say it's a bit of a sidebar in the last year of like, you're just you all the time, Russell, which is nice because that was an intention of mine. Be authentic, just be me all of the time. So how the resilience coach came about. So I've always been interested in human behavior. I think, from the moment I could sort of walk and talk, I think I've been curious about human beings and why they do the things that they do. So it took me a little while to get there, but most of my career has been in learning leadership and organizational development. And how the resilience coach came about is that my last permanent role was at a company called the Cooperative Group in Manchester. So there are co-ops all over the world, and it's a particular way of running a business. It's a highly value-based business system, which I loved. However, not long after I joined it, it got itself into a pickle financially, nothing to do with me, but it literally got to the stage where the business was about to just come to an end, and it had been around for 180 years. So all of my internal clients literally coming to you with their heads in their hands going, Russell, what on earth would do? The world has fallen on our heads. And I went, well, there's this word called resilience, and there's a lovely acronym called VUCA, which I presume that you are familiar with. And I went, our answers are in there. Our solutions are in there. So in terms of just working with them on actually, how can you get to a place where you feel optimistic, you feel good, even though there's lots of craziness going on and you don't have an awful lot of the answers, you're still in a good place to be able to face into them. That's what I was working upon. And then when I left the co-op and I did some navel gazing around, it's time to go out by myself, which was 8 years ago, next month. It's like, who am I? What am I doing? And I went, actually, do you know what? I am the resilience coach. I have spent the last number of years talking about it. So how to lead yourself and others well in a full-on crazy world, something that I'm having a go at specializing in, but also learning all of the time, every conversation with every client, every company to go, well, this is supposed to be the answer. That does work. It doesn't work. And if that doesn't work, what else could we try? Live in Leeds, married, gorgeous wife, no kids. We love to travel. So, we'll just as much as humanly possible, we like to travel. And the pandemic did have an impact upon that. But now we will be going to Australia in the summer to see family. So that's me, essentially. Or that's today's answer to that question.
So it's going to be winter when you get there if you're leaving in your UK summer. So.
It is. Yeah. Yes.
I made a mistake the other day. We have, as I stated when we were out there, we have a global cohort. And we were taking a 2-week break in July, and I made a mistake of saying we're taking a summer break. And my Australian friends jumped in and quickly said, no, it's not summer.
And we really are having a heat wave in the UK right now. So I'm really not trying to complain. It's just that we would just like a tiny bit of rain, please. It's like, I'm not complaining, but the heavens, could you just give us a little bit of water is all we want.
Well, tell us what a heat wave is in Leeds, because I think it's probably a bit different than some.
Right. So it's like 28 degrees, 29, So yes. We're not used to that, essentially. And some random thing that just come up on a feed about the wettest place in the United Kingdom, their biggest river has almost dried up. So we're just like, okay, that's not good.
So tell us a little bit about VUCA. You mentioned that acronym. Is that a central piece of your framework for coaching?
Yeah, so I take a strengths-based approach, and it is really all about working with clients on, what does a resilient them look like, sound like, and feel like? But then part of that is just trying to get people to think differently about the lovely sentence of change is constant. So, the VUCA piece, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. We're saying change is constant. There's always something going on somewhere that could impact you at some stage. And when you walk into a room full of people and you say change is constant, they're just going to go, yeah, we know. And duh. And so it's then using the VUCA model to go, can we really unpick and understand how come their change is persistent? There's something always going on somewhere. But then the next bit, and linking it the resilience, is I also say, and some things are always going to stay the same. So let's have a really great conversation about what's staying the same as for you. And to start with, that's actually their strengths, their skills, their capabilities, their attitude, or what could they develop that stayed the same that would be really useful, really helpful for them, really worthwhile, that they could always hang their hat on or give them a sense of grounding. So even though it might be full on crazy, they can actually go, do you know what? I am aware of all of these things that have stayed the same, or I am working on staying the same because they're useful to me, they're helpful to me, they're worthwhile to me. And for me, is how I link the resilient human piece in, change is constant, but actually let's support you about what can we make sure and grow for you that stays the same, that's useful, worthwhile, helps you face into the world, helps you be in this lovely place called thrive rather than just hanging on. So there's a huge amount of sort of buzzwords that I feel like I use. So I do always try and then go, but what we mean by that is, because, thriving, coping and surviving, I think sometimes there's a risk that when people are coping and surviving, they believe that they are being resilient, but sometimes they're not. They might be using some resiliency skills, or they might be depleting some of their resilience. But actually, if they can shift themselves predominantly into a thrive place, then that's where the true resilience is. And that's why I like to define resilience as springing forward with learning. I just like to challenge this idea of bounce back, because, life happens to us. And if we say, right, that happened, and I'll go back to how I was, I'm sitting there as a coach going, well, hang on a minute. Let's just see what you learned from it. What could you take away from it? So to be able to spring forward with learning, you need, from all of life's experiences, whether good or not so good, to pause and re-energize and reflect. And in those reflections, it's the learnings to go, actually, from my recent experiences, what am I going to keep and what am I going to leave behind because it didn't work for me? So perpetually finding a way that's useful and worthwhile for you to spring forward with learning, that's for me is where people then get actually into the resilience space, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, a lot of common themes between what you're describing and what Lucas and I think and teach coaching. We're always thinking about looking forward and growing. And I heard you use both of those words.
You said something that resonated with me, where you're just you all of the time, and we're, as coaches, we're always trying to cultivate that self-awareness and getting people to recognize their strengths and things that they could learn and grow and improve on. So how do you see that self-awareness piece adding in, like, enriching the conversations around resiliency?
So I have to keep talking about my own sort of personal lived experience. So I know that I'm privileged. It is the white male, nice, lovely family background, had a good education, things like that. There were some challenges growing up in the fact that it took me a while to find my niche. So at school, education-wise, just my own sort of teenage version of working out how I like to learn. So I went to grammar school and it was like end of year exams, but I did well throughout the year, but failed all of my end of year exams. It was just working at that early age and sitting in like the headmaster's imposing office at a grammar school with like the cape on. If you imagine a bit of a Hogwarts headmaster, it was a bit like that. And I've been sitting there, he was brilliant headmaster, but sort of going, so Russell, how come you failed all your exams? And me sort of saying, yeah, I can't regurgitate all the information. I'm not good at exams. And they'll tell you all of like, yeah, you've got to revise. And so it just was like 3 years on the trot, being in a headmaster's office and going, I told you, I'm no good at exams. And then actually when you could go on to sixth form or college, me making the decision to actually go, do you know what? Continuing to educate myself in the same way is not working for me. So I need to take ownership and responsibility. So I remember I went to a college rather than staying at school as the open day, and to sort of see if this was a different type of learning that worked for me. And they sort of said, we don't do exams here. It is actually about coursework throughout the year. And I remember that I signed up there and then, and I rang my dad from a telephone box because mobiles weren't around then. I'm old. And I said, right, I've signed up. Brilliant. And I was so excited. And I remember his response at the end of the phone, which was like, I thought you were just going to check the place out. And I was like, oh no, I've signed up. I'm coming. It's here. I'm doing it. So in my small way, really understanding how actually, how I like to learn and what works for me, but some of the things that I need to do. And then actually career-wise, before I realized I wanted to be in learning development, doing lots of different roles, which weren't quite learning and development, and felt like I was batting my head against the brick wall. And then when I did get learning and development roles, because when a company goes into trouble, learning and development is the first to get cut, being made redundant 6 times throughout the course of my career. And then it's sort of going, okay, and I have to come home and tell girlfriend and then the wife, right, we're back down to one salary again. But all of it was with, I know inside me I had a purpose that there's actually a particular way that I want to do this thing called learning development. And it took me quite a long time to go, actually, it's coaching and facilitation, and it just took a while for me to work that out. And when I got there, I flew. I was like, it's all, gone into place now. And then throughout all of that, as you start to do like learning development career, I did buy into the fact of like, well, you've got to be a role model. You have to, when you stand in front of others for credibility and you facilitate an event and people sort of say, what have you done? You have to have good answers for that. You have to have lived experience, good answers around, this is what I've done when I had this challenge. This is how I came about it. This is what I was feeling. This is what I was thinking. So standing up in front of others and talking about your feelings isn't necessarily something that people find easy. And then running a business for 8 years, that's not dead simple. It's got its ups and downs. The pandemic was a challenge, but it's 8 years old. Next month is the Resilience Coach. So most small businesses fail within the first few years. So I've come out the other side. It's grown and it's growing again. And you have to do all those things about being a resilient human to make your business grow and flourish. So hopefully I'm role modeling as much as possible around these different aspects of being resilient.
So you mentioned something a minute ago about your strengths-based approach. And this is more for my own insights and maybe for our listeners and viewers. I struggle with that because I have some significant strengths, but I also have some significant weaknesses. And if I ignore them, especially if I'm a one-man show, you're talking about entrepreneurship and perhaps even working in the freelance market. If I'm starting a coaching business, hanging my shingle, as we might say in America, can I ignore my strengths or ignore my weaknesses and just focus on my strengths? And how do I do that?
So traditionally, I'm not so sure what it's like in the US, but mostly in the United Kingdom, when we talk about, this is what you're good at, and then these are all your development areas, we have the risk then that we spend too much time focusing on the things that we don't like doing and de-energize us and bring us down. So that's why I really like the strengths-based approach. So, and this is a massive light bulb moment to huge amounts of my clients. When I say, look, we're going to do this psychometrical strength scope. There's 24 strengths. Clever people and I have come up with the fact that these things that energize us, we enjoy doing them. So 3 of my significant 7 strengths are strategic mindedness, big picture, collaboration, working with others, and developing others. Being a coach, I'm energized by those. I love doing them. So that's me at my best. So to start with, it is to go to say to everybody, find out what you naturally really enjoy doing and do more of that, because it builds natural resilience and natural confidence. Then everybody straight away, every time you show them, there's this wheel of like what their strengths profile is. And you've got these lengths of these, bars. Whilst it's not about that, their eyes go to the short bars and they go, oh, so that's my development. And I go, no, stop. I said, to start with, forget about that. And they go, but I'm supposed to, because it used to be the case of these are things that you're really good at. So you're good at those. So stop doing them and focus on these things that you aren't. So imagine, so this was a conversation I had with my dad. So nothing against him, but it was a case of like when I was doing my O-levels at school, so my high school things. And he would sort of say, oh, okay, so tell us about human biology. I loved human biology. So I would go, oh, yeah, brilliant. Mr. Nichols, great teacher. I understand topics, brilliant. I've got this extra homework. I'm going to go and do it now. Then he'd go, okay, you got good grades in that. Tell us about chemistry. Oh, you got low grades in chemistry. And I would go, yeah, not sure about that. Me and the teacher just look at each other and go, we know that we both don't get on and don't understand this. And I hate walking towards chemistry. And he goes, right then. Okay, so human biology you love. You've nailed that. Forget that. What we're going to do in the holidays is you're going to go to chemistry school. And I was like, why did you hate me? What have I done? So you do need to be aware of the things that you don't enjoy doing. And so it's limiting weaknesses. But then that's when you compensate for them. So that's when you put just either you ask for help in those moments, or you consider how you could bring your strengths to help you with the things that you don't enjoy doing. And it's also, if you can't do either of those two things, just develop some habits. So the thing that I enjoy doing the least is detail. If you ask me to do detail, like you've burst my balloon and I've withered inside. However, I'm aware of that and go, right, in this moment in time, I'm going to have to do lots of detail. I do have to do it by myself. So these are the habits that I put in place, to help myself do detail in that moment. But the majority of the time, I'm aiming to harness the things that I enjoy doing naturally because I'm good at them and it's me at my best. And that is keeping me as much as humanly possible in a good place. And it's a massive light bulb moment for a huge amount of my clients. They sort of go, so you don't want me to work on the little bar? No. You want me to do more of the thing that I love doing? And I go, yes. And I go, well, isn't that brilliant?
And speaking of resiliency and, hearing your story of, this school works for me and this school doesn't. I'm watching this documentary about the 2008 Olympic basketball U.S. team. And they were talking about how their challenge was taking NBA basketball and then adapting to international basketball where there's different rules, there's different team structures, it's almost like a whole different game. So I want to talk about, are there some aspects of resiliency that's kind of adapting to the organization and like kind of from that perspective, I guess?
Totally. So one of the specific dimensions of being resilient is the lovely word of adaptability. So the short answer is yes, it's significantly about adaptability is part of being resilient. And so if you look on my website, I've got the resilience wheel. So there's 7 aspects, 7 dimensions to being resilient. And one of them is adaptability. And the resilience wheel, it's just something I put together. And it's a build upon proper research from Robertson Cooper and others. There's also some research that shows that the adaptability element of being resilient is slightly more significant because it shows, so adaptability is openness to change, which I'm sure we've, so it's really considering everybody that's listening now about what changes do you like, how much you like change, which changes you're okay with, which changes you're not okay with, really understanding that. And then the research shows that those people that spend a third of their time working upon their adaptability, they actually appear to get themselves into this place called Thrive that we talk about, So they're open and they're curious. So clearly, the fact that the US basketball team was aware that's what they needed to do, brilliant, great, because they didn't go down the route of we're going to make what we know, we're going to force it upon to these circumstances. We know that we need to adapt our experiences to something else, because if we don't, we'll fail, So I would imagine, that part of the conversation is, what do we need to do to win the gold medal? So they'll look at themselves, strengths and weaknesses, how do we compensate for it? When are we at our best? And, actually, we've noticed all the rules are different. Actually, so we're going to have to be adapting ourselves. So organizationally, absolutely, as an individual organization, it is considering how much you want to adapt to the organization's culture that doesn't necessarily take away from your own personal value system. That's the struggle a lot of time with individuals. So quite a lot of my coaching clients sort of go, I do really like my job, but I'm struggling with some of the things the organization does. So then we have to talk about their options and choices, where they are prepared to adapt, where they're not, or is this time for them to leave and to find something else that will align more with their values? And one of the dimensions of being resilient is also having a purpose. So it really is actually figuring out if as a leader, what's their leadership purpose? Do they know it? Can they articulate it? How much does it link to their life's purpose? And the purpose one is really fascinating to me because as part of being a role model around resilience, I had to have a purpose, So mine is, by the year 2025, I want to positively affect 100,000 people. And right now I'm up to about 40,422-ish. Okay. When I started, there wasn't the statistics behind it because I was like, I don't do detail. But somebody said, you need to make it smart, Russell. SM, everything has to, if you've got an objective, it's like, okay. So a purpose is a little bit bigger than like objectives, but yes, I'll put some things to it. And then it's really fascinating to just see how people react to that of going, gosh, have I got a purpose? Do I know what I'm here for? What's the point? So it's helpful. It's helpful to know what your direction of travel is, what your grounding is, what gets you out of bed each day, how come you do the things that you do. When you put all this effort and energy into life, what's it against? What's it for? And so I would imagine that the US basketball team, the purpose was to win the gold, but at the same time, I would imagine it's also to get the best from each other. It's also we enjoy ourselves. We want to look back at our experience around we were a good team. We got to know each other. I would guess. I would imagine.
So, here you are in Leeds, and Lucas is in Virginia. I'm in Las Vegas, and we teach a global cohort, and we coach a global cohort. So, give us your thoughts on cross culture, cross generation.
An element of it is value systems and purpose. What's collective purpose and collective value system? But I also talk an awful lot about what enables an individual or a team or an organization to get to optimistic. So we often sort of talk about in challenging times, just be positive. And that can really turn into the toxic positivity, which is, not what we want to do. So I think you may be familiar with this, but the whole optimism piece is coming from the Stockdale paradox, hope for the best and plan for the worst. That's what I'm talking about. So it's finding some common ground. So when you've got cross cultures and you've got cross generations, you get that room of people together and just go, when we look each other in the eye and we know each other, we understand each other's strengths, our weaknesses that we'll compensate for. How do we get to optimistic? What does that look like, sound like, and feel like? That for me would actually create some common ground. And then it really is then an opportunity to celebrate the differences, which I know we talk about an awful lot. Got to have diverse cultures. You've got to celebrate the differences. To start with, we probably don't do enough about celebrating and understanding the diversity of thought of different people in the room. It's like at any time when you could lay a problem or lay a challenge or lay a picture or something in front of a room of people and go, what do you see? We don't do enough of understanding the various responses to that, because straight away that's like, how come you came to it from that place? Or gosh, how did you see that? Or your brain's thought about it in this way. Wow, isn't that incredible? How could we harness that? So people listening, in terms of the optimism piece, it's linked to, change is constant, but things stay the same. So think about optimism has got to be grounded in reality. So, don't bury your head in the sand. When there's a problem, when there's a challenge, you've got to get consensus on what the actual challenge and problems are. And you've just got to be in agreement, not to feel downhearted or downbeaten or depressed around, oh my God, this is our challenge. It's just get some consensus on what's, the problem we've got to face. Then it's all about going, what are my strengths, skills, capabilities, experiences, behaviors, attitude, and what's everybody else's they've got, and how do we harness all of that so we can feel genuinely hopeful about facing into our challenges. And as a result of that, we get feelings of positivity. So, and just like for me, I quite often walk into a lot of rooms now and go, so how optimistic are you? And see what happens, see where it goes, essentially, and then unpick it from there. Got to find the common ground, essentially. And if it's about your strengths and your skills first, because if you sort of talking about common ground around climate change, that's when it can turn into a bun fight between the generations, can't it? Going, well, thanks, Russell, you messed this up for us. And I go, yeah, I know, we did. I'm sorry. Well, what can we do about it, essentially?
Also thinking about that cross-generational, different cultures and things like that, trying to gain the common ground. As coaches, we're talking to the individuals a lot, right? But we're talking now about like, okay, how do we go from having a group that's kind of in the storming phase to performing well? Do you do that through individual coaching, or is there more of like a group-based approach there?
So it's individual and group on both, really. And it is exactly that. It's taken them through those phases, forming, storming, norming, etc., etc. Realizing as well that it might be persistently changing as well, people coming in and out. So there is a fundamental core that's going on. And, the risk of repeating myself, it's probably a good point to just keep starting with the purpose and the values. What are we here to do? How come we've all turned up? And then from that, you'll get to understand people's passions and enthusiasms, and then actually where they would like to contribute. I would also, at the same time, which I do with teams and individuals, I'm going, what does a resilient you or a resilient us look like, sound like, and feel like? It's like you need to map that out as in terms of a direction of travel. We take the resilient wheel and go, when we've got our wheel as our team in a really good place, what have we got? What's happening? What have we done? And what falls out of that is all the stuff that you would expect. And they won't necessarily use the fancy terminology for it, but also say, well, we'll respect each other. We'll talk about no idea is a bad idea. We'll actually really understand each other. We'll look after each other. We'll actually understand when they're at their best or they're not feeling great and what they need in that moment. And that essentially is psychological safety, is essentially what you're talking about here. We can talk about anything and it's all right. We can get on. We can have a disagreement and it's fine. So yeah, what does a resilient team look like, sound like, and feel like? And, make sure they put some markers in the stand. And then it's also about totally making sure that people are comfortable with the feedback around what they are and aren't doing around that. So huge amounts of times I say, right, we've talked about how we're going to have this learning experience. And I asked 2 questions. So we've agreed we're going to do this. This is our map of what we're going to look like. So I always say, are you okay when I tell you all when you're doing that well? And everybody goes, oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So you're also okay when I share with you and tell you when I don't think you're doing something that we agreed we would do. And everybody sort of goes, okay, all right then, okay. So you have to open that door to go, we're going to share. I'm going to take the lead on it, but we're also going to do a good conversation about how well are we doing? What are we not doing? We agreed with what's something on here we agreed we would do, and we're not doing it.
Yeah. Our team does retros every 2 weeks, and it's what went well, what didn't go well. And that's really what I want to hear. What didn't go well, what went well that's easy stuff.
Well, so this is where the strengths-based approach also comes in, and trying to help people understand. So we have negativity bias as humans, as you're well aware. So we do initially want to focus on what didn't go well. But if you can get into the habit, and I know a previous episode was on habits, if you can get into the habit of asking first what went well, but unpicking how come it went well, what were the strengths, the skills, the capabilities, the attitude, mindset that contributed to this going well, and really just make sure that's clear. Then you talk about what didn't, and then you have to link the two. You're going to have to say, okay, so all those things that went well and how come they went well, how many of those things will be useful in making the improvements in these areas? And the vast majority of the meetings in the world around organizations start with, feel free, everybody, to, message me if I'm wrong, but they start with, show us, the red boxes on the spreadsheets, the things that aren't right, show us where the things are down that should be up, they start there. And then suddenly go, oh gosh, we were told by HR we need you to do celebrate success. Quick, somebody somebody tell me something nice they've done. Well, I went for a walk. Yeah, great, brilliant. We've done that one. So flip it on its head, essentially. And even if there's only one thing that's gone well, start there. Really understand how come it went well. And then see anything there that will help us with what hasn't. Lessons learned is brilliant. It's like, how well do organizations do lessons learned?
So my last question, I'm really intrigued by this relationship between resilience and purpose. And I think it speaks very loudly to me personally. I'm in the 5th act of life, if you read Shakespeare. I was a lover and a soldier, and now I'm a justice. telling stories for a living. I got my spectacles here, my round belly. As I went from fourth to fifth, so I stepped out of the CEO chair 5, 6, 7 years ago. I really struggled with who am I now? What do I do now? And I got through that with a coach, a lot of introspection. So talk to us in your coaching practice of that. When you come across someone that's struggling with resilience and has a lack of purpose, I mean, what does that look like?
So what it looks like is, I think, potentially what you experienced. It's either they are behaviorally coming across, or they're specifically overtly saying the sentences of, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm doing it. I feel all at sea and I'm not sure what the point is. I'm questioning everything. So anxiety in some shape or form is coming to the fore, worries, concerns. So that's, first of all, it's about recognizing that. It's then supporting them to tell the story of their chapters. And there are also an awful lot of the time, in terms of career coaching, clients come to us because for the first time ever, they didn't get a job role they went for. Or for the first time ever, somebody's tapped them on the shoulder and gone, you need to go and talk to a coach. You're a bit broken. It's just like, what? Okay. That's how a lot of clients come to coaches as well. So you have to unpick that. Or they had their last performance review and they just weren't interested in it. Or they just come away and gone, do you know what? That fire in the belly or why I'm doing it, it's like, nah, it's gone, essentially. So then you have to unpick when they did have their version of a purpose. And it's actually a lot of the time, people don't talk about this word purpose. And, a lot of the time you talk to people, why do you do something? It's like, well, I do it for my family. You go, yeah, great, absolutely. And so that's something where you have to build upon it, So we have to find the sort of, the right questions to help them sort of tease out what gets them out of bed each day. What do they enjoy doing? How come they enjoy doing it? One of the great questions to ask, which they also have to think about, is give us some examples in your life when you felt proud of what you've done. You don't necessarily have to have led it. You could have been part of something. You could have even been on the periphery of it, but it gave you a warm, fuzzy feeling inside, and try and think of some examples about when they've had that feeling of sort of pride, worthwhile. And then you work with them and unpicking in terms of what were they doing, what was their role in that story, and then what behaviors, what skills, what strengths, what conversations, what experiences they have. And then you'll have some common core around it. You'll have some common themes. And that could, or most of the time, enables them to say, actually, I've understood. I've gone and looked at the past and understand actually what my purpose is. And yes, actually, I can rekindle that going forward in this new place, this new role. Or actually, that purpose is really not relevant anymore. However, by talking about the old purpose, not relevant, do you know what? I think a bit of a new one is just beginning to emerge around actually what is important to me and what is, relevant to me. And then you can ask other questions as long as they don't sort of sound morbid, but, what do you want people to say about you when you're gone? Those types of things. If you were to write your own eulogy, what would you like on it? If you want to tell the story of the 5th chapter of your life, what do you want that to be? When somebody's talking about it with sort of bright eyes and enthusiasm, or they're talking about it positively, emotively, what do you want those emotions to be? Those could be ways that they would sort of tease that out. You see, your mind's definitely going there, JR. You're thinking about some of that.
Oh, yeah. I have a full page of notes already, Russell. So our tradition is Lucas gets asked the final on the record question. So we'll chat a little bit after we turn the recording off.
So you talked a lot about in that answer, finding things that you're proud about, things that kind of give you that joy, that feeling of fulfillment. And I've noticed that in my life, kind of embracing things that are outside of work in my personal life, hobbies, things like that, like music, art, things, exercise. those have kind of enriched my professional life because I can I can go and do these things that I find enjoyable and then kind of pick pieces and help, maybe give me some perspective. So I'm curious, Russell, do you have any hobbies or things outside of your profession that you find that kind of feed into your abilities as a coach?
Yeah, do you know, it's a funny one, Hobbies, because I don't necessarily have like a real specific hobby. There are lots of things I like to do. So for everybody that's listening now, I have been searching for a couple of years for just give me some ideas about another hobby that I can do. So I read books. I love spending time with my wife. I like to travel. I have a push bike as a local canal to us. So I go out on that when I feel like it. Genuinely, like spending time with friends, just that social interaction is there. So whilst it might still sound like work, I've got my own podcast. I'm part of a radio station as well. And it's just, these are things that I do, and all of them sort of energize me. And in me doing them, I'm probably doing some permanent self-reflection and go, oh yeah, I can bring that back into, the job role, the next coaching conversation that I do. But I did play instruments as a child, but I didn't, play the piano and trombone, but didn't keep those going. My mate that I've talked about, Richard, that I went to Vegas with recently, he has recently just taken up singing. He's in a choir. I'm not entirely sure if anybody really wants to listen to my singing voice. My wife's a great singer, but that's made me sort of think of something. I did, as a child growing up, also, Richard was part of that, was in an amateur dramatics group, so theatre club. So my wife and I have done theatre at times. So some of these things might come back. I don't know. I've got a potential idea. And if you see one of those things, if you say out loud, you'll see. But I didn't know whether to go down the comedy stand-up learning, genuinely to sort of, because I do a bit of public speaking, to just actually try and make that better. That would be my reason for doing it, I absolutely have no idea whether I'm funny or not, That's not why I'm doing it. But I was like, I just want to understand a bit more about actually what's comedy? What is that? Because maybe I could bring it in and enhance some of the things that I do. So I have enough going on at the minute that I bring back, but I am always on a bit of a perpetual search to go, what else could it be?
No, totally. That search and that experimentation is totally what I'm trying to get at. I think it's amazing that like 50-year-old man might take up like karate lessons or something, something just completely out of left field.
Yeah. No, yeah. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the comedy thing's a bit fairly left field to go, right then, I'm a little bit later in life with it. Yes, I also have the belly. I do like the occasional drink. So let's go out on stage and see what fun I can make of myself. Be vulnerable. There you go. That might be it.
Yeah, I'd pay a few pounds to see that, Russell. Just let us know when and where.
Okay. All right.
Well, it's going to be streaming online, actually, for millions of people.
Well, that concludes this episode of Building a Coaching Culture. I truly hope that this episode was helpful to you. If it was, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Maybe stop and give us a rating or a review and share this podcast with someone who might find it helpful as well. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.